Sorry, don't want to block anyone's view there. There you go. Alrighty, so my name is Trudie, and I'm a type 1 diabetic. And do you want to hear my favorite diabetes pickup line? Is, "You're so sweet, you're making my blood sugar rise, and I need to inject insulin." So my friends are starting to think that's the reason that I have trouble dating. I think that it's because I have to deal with so many pricks on a daily basis, I don't need to date them as well. So before I get started, is anyone in the audience a type 1 diabetic? Okay, good, because I thought if I have to hear my neighbor's cat is a type 2 diabetic, I'd ask you to leave right now. So I'm what people would call a bad diabetic, or a rebel without insulin, if you will, whereby I love all food, and I pretty much will eat so much until I can no longer get up from the couch. And I know what some of you are thinking, like, "Trudie, how can you be a diabetic and be unhealthy? Don't you want to keep both your feet and eyesight?" I'm allowed to make that joke, you can't. And so I've actually composed a list of things that diabetics, such as myself, type 1 diabetics, aren't allowed to eat. So we have poison. That's it, that's the list. No, I'm kidding. There is another thing. So it's foods that have poison as an ingredient. Keep that in mind. So the difference between myself and healthy people such as yourselves is that when I eat something and my blood sugar goes up, my pancreas basically is like that person in customer service that is just like, "Do you need something? Do you want to speak to the manager? I'm so done here today." Needless to say, we don't get along. But now the difference between a type 1 and a type 2 diabetic is that, so one day I woke up and my autoimmune system, you know, the one that protects you from all your colds and flus, basically just decided to attack my insulin-producing cells. Kind of like, remember like that scene, like, "This is Sparta!" Yeah, like exactly that way. And whereas with type 2 diabetes, it's kind of like the nurses that are on strike because they're not getting paid enough. So it's like, yeah, we're not getting paid enough to do all this work that you're giving us. So if you could just stop giving us work. Because there's too much glucose or sugar in the blood and your body just can't cope with it, and that's type 2 diabetes. Not the same as mine. So basically I have this wonderful contraption on my arm that I'm gonna model for you right here. Yeah, I like the excitement. I do, because I was getting ready to be like, "Oh, well, you know, you'd be more excited if you had type 1 diabetes and it didn't have a cure." But you are excited, which I'm really glad about. So the wonderful thing about this, and I didn't just bring my phone because I'm youth and we have to have our phones with us all the time, it's that actually I can use my phone to literally just scan this little machine and it gives me my blood sugar reading. So I have made a game with my friends. Whenever we go out, we will try to guess what my blood glucose is going to be. I know. It's kind of like a game of Russian roulette, except we all know who's going to die. Someday. So basically, we all put in like our guessings, and then whoever is the furthest away from making that guess has to buy the next round. It's wonderful. And my friend, she's hilarious. She's actually a nurse, not that kind of nurse, but you know, like just the actual kind of nurse. She thinks that she has this extra sense for my blood glucose. So she thinks that like she's one step away from like putting her hand on my forehead and being like, I feel like it's going to be like 12. And I'm like, "Woman, we've been drinking Copperbergs and we had burgers before this. Of course it's going to be in the double digits." Doesn't take a genius. But what actually I love about wearing this thing is all the comments that I get when I go on nights out. So people will come up to me and they'll be like, ooh, is that a nicotine patch? And I'll be like, yeah, they've gotten really advanced these days, haven't they? Or another thing is like, if someone does ask me what it is, I'll be like, oh, it's actually a thermostat, but it's actually broken at the moment. That's why I sweat so much. Or this is my favorite one that I love to say, is that it's actually, my parents forgot to take off the security tag when they took me home from the store. And with those things, it's really tricky because if you pull it off, it leaves a huge ink stain. And my parents are really against tattoos, so like I can't do that now, so I just have to live with it. And which is always followed by kind of like, oh. Yeah, it's quite enjoyable. So I chose to study biomedicine for my undergrad, simply because I wanted to judge people when they get type 1 and type 2 diabetes wrong. And I get to sit there and just listen to them get it completely wrong. Which is also why us type 1 diabetics get so kind of upset, let's just say, when people mix up type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Because I'll tell someone that I'm a type 1 diabetic, and they'll be like, so is that the good kind or the bad kind? And I'm just looking at them thinking like, well, if I stab you through the chest, are you dead or just not breathing? So one of my favorite activities is to inject insulin in public places or on public transportation just to freak people out. Because I love when mothers will purposefully turn their child away from me, kind of as if I'm doing heroin on public transportation. And I just keep thinking heroin, now in a convenient location, so that you can be a junkie on the go. Let's be frank here. And yeah, I have been on dates in the past where I'd have to inject insulin either before or after a meal or something, and the guy will just be looking at me in this pure disgust, what am I doing? Not even trying to hide it, but they'll be like, ew, that's so horrible. And I'm just sitting there thinking, gee, for such a prick, you sure are afraid of needles, aren't you? And then I cough on them and tell them type 1 diabetes is contagious. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.